when you work today, here, beautiful work. So glad today, super special show. For those of you who have been following, obviously we've been going through the 9 steps to developing professional relationships. And these last 2 steps are going to take a couple of days, a couple of weeks actually, for us to go through because they are so vital and so important. If you have been following us, been working out with us over the last couple of weeks, then you know we've given you all of the information in previous episodes that you need to start to understand the importance of building your professional relationships, and then to move forward into actual action steps that are required for you to build your professional relationships. Everything you need to do to find the right mentors, to find the right counselors, to find the right advisory board members. You develop your hero council, which is another concept that we developed many years ago. We've talked about all those things so far. And today, we're going to get into some of the nits and grits that are required for you to understand in order to actually work with a high-powered team. And when I mean a high-powered team, it's an important concept for you to understand. I'm not talking about anybody you can find. I'm talking people who are already known as the best of the best in their particular industry, in your particular area, right? So if you have found the right people to recruit them onto your team, now you have to make sure you're doing everything you need to do to manage them well. Because if you do not, what's going to happen ultimately is you're going to create a process that is going to be ineffective. You might be able to get some short-term things going, but literally your productivity is going to suffer dramatically if you don't pay attention to the very distinct lessons we're going to teach you over the next 2 weeks. And I want you to focus on those things, because understanding this, if you have recruited a great, amazing team, and you don't enter the planning mode with them in mind and what they're doing in mind, and actually in collaboration with them, you're going to find that you're going to open up a can of worms to a lot of chaos, right? Now, there's 4 steps to the planning process that I want to share with you all, because they're vital to your ability to move forward with your team. The first step is understanding the power of belief and how to use that. And then we're going to talk about the power of commitment and what that means and how you work without that. And we're going to answer questions about how do you develop with your team a strategic mission that's going to make sense. And then finally, how do you wrap all that up into the right types of processes so that you can have the most effective results possible. Now, for those of you who are following it, basically, I've shared that information already in our show notes. Everything you need to have to begin to put that team together, to begin to work with that team, to learn how to effectively develop them and treat them accordingly. Everything should be right there for you. But today, we're just going to talk about belief and commitment. How do you know your team is completely and totally on board with the right kinds of values and the right kinds of belief systems? First of all, it's important to enter into the types of conversations that allow your high-powered team to share with you what their greatest values are and how they have seen those values either on display in the past or contributed to those values previously. And I'll give you an example. As a coach, one of my greatest values is courage, right? And I don't mean just be bold for the sake of being bold. I mean, have the courage that you need to have to move yourself, your team, and people forward, right? And it does sometimes when you don't have all the information, when you don't have all the resources, but you need to proceed and move forward anyway. It does require courage. And that's one of my core values. I don't like it when people allow themselves to be halted by information or people that discourage them, right? That doesn't make me feel optimistic. It doesn't help me grab onto the energy that we have to create, right? So a part of my principles that I focus all of my clients on are, productivity, focus, and energy. Now you can't have all that well if you're going to be fearful, right? If you're going to allow fear, doubt, blame, shame to affect how you move forward and how you do the things that you do, especially in your professional relationships, then you're going to have a problem accomplishing the other parts that I'm going to need to work with you on, which is really being so effective that you can have a high level of productivity and drive a tremendous amount of energy to whatever that you do, so that you can develop the kind of focus that you need to really, really hone in on in order to make the things that you need to work effectively. So belief is an incredible, important aspect to get right up front when you're working with highly effective teams. If you get this wrong, what will happen is people will not have faith in each other when they need to. They will not trust each other when they need to. And you're going to want your highly effective team to be cooking on all cylinders and, making sure they're doing all the things they need to do to create everything that you want to create. So it's essential that they believe in one another. You can't have people on the team that don't believe in each other. They don't believe in the values. That's why I'm trying to tell you, it's important to not just to display the kind of belief system that you think you're going to create or generate within your organization or within your team, but you're going to want to make sure that everyone values those things. Not necessarily the same way, but they have to value them. No matter what industry they are coming from, no matter what guild or trade or skill set they have, the values that you all agree on that are important have to be on display. And it has to be something that everybody is familiar with. If I tell a story of how I have used and displayed these courageous attributes that I hold so dear in another moment, what's going to happen is people are going to see that, and I'm telling a story about it, and they're going to hear it and they understand it, and they're going to either like it, and so, or I go, wow, that's really impressive. I really like that. And then they begin to respect that I do have a level of courage that's not wild and outlandish, but it makes sense. I know how to make sure it makes sense for the moment that I'm in, right? And giving a person that I'm working with that understanding of how I move forward and how I move through things will help them have a sense of belief and trust in me. This is super, super important. And every member of the team needs to be really good at displaying and sharing when they have displayed or when they have used these values. And this goes for all the values that you're going to need to really embark upon the mission or do anything that you want to do. So those values are key. There's also principles that drive everything. I'll never forget when I first read Stephen Covey's Principles of Highly Effective People. And when he shared, first of all, what a principle is versus a value. A principle is something that I've shared this in the past, but I want to make sure I go through it really quickly with you guys today. A principle is something that when you embrace it, when you understand it, you understand both the consequences of working against principle and the opportunities of working with principle. And when you really understand that and you know how to work within the principle, then you're going to receive the benefits that everybody receives and have already historically always received from taking advantage of the gift that whatever principle there is brings to you. right? So it's just like the principle of gravity, right? What goes up comes down. This is gravity, right? Everything is falling at the same rate, at the same time. It always has been, always will be. It's a principle, the principle of gravity. It's a principle, It doesn't change because you don't believe in it. It doesn't change because you want it to change. And so understanding principle in terms of working with your team, whatever principles that you're gonna that you're gonna really have to dial in, is critically important to planning with your team, no matter what you've been doing, how long you've been doing it. I can't stress that enough. I see we got a lot of people that just joining us from Facebook, from YouTube, from LinkedIn. I really appreciate you. Listen, why don't you do me a favor in the chat if you can? Go ahead and post your information. Tell us where you're coming from. If I can give you a shout out on the call, I'll definitely do so. Thank you for joining. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for giving us thumbs up. All the beautiful things that you all are doing to keep this program alive and well and functioning for small businesses. I'm totally floored by how you're doing that, right? Now, the other question you might ask about belief is, why is belief so important? When people believe in one another, when they believe that and can trust in each other's skill set, in each other's emotional and intelligence, those things are going to allow people to move faster through whatever processes that you're gonna talk about. We'll talk about that much later. It's going to allow people to feel more comfortable working in this space, especially a high trust space. And it's very difficult for people who are experts in their field to trust experts in other fields in the same way that they would trust an expert in their own field. And so you have to think about that. How do you develop that trust? How do you develop that belief and that hope fast? And it goes through it's about storytelling, right? It's about making sure that we've heard each other's stories. We talk about, if you got a team of 5, everybody needs to have a one-on-one meeting with every other member of the team, where you begin to discuss those values and those principles that you know are going to be effective and how you've displayed them and used them in the past. Super, super important. I was talking about principles, super important. Values are more important because values you get to choose, right? Principles you can't choose. You just have to acknowledge that they exist and then work within them. But values also guide and direct your behavior. You get to choose which ones you're going to be using and how you're going to be using it and what that's going to be. And sometimes there's a lot of creativity in how you work with values. Like courage, like I told you earlier, is a value. It's not a principle, right? It's a value of mine. And you have to be able to talk with your teammates and talk with your team members on an equal footing about what these values are that are going to be driving what you also put together. You got to discuss it. And you have to agree, right? If someone thinks that, courage is not a value that we're going to bring to the table, we think it's even important to have, they're probably not going to work well with me. Because I can imagine a moment's going to happen when the team is moving forward, and there's going to be some things that we don't actually know. And see, that's not going to stop me from testing it out. That's not going to stop me from trying it out. That's not going to stop me from moving forward. It might stop another team member, and then we're going to have a problem, right? Because I'm going to be like, okay, time out. You stop giving all the resources that you were given. You stop paying attention. You're standing back when you need to be leaning in. And I don't have a problem with that, right? You don't have to explain to me what's driving you, what's making you fearful, what's making you doubt, what's making you hesitate, what's making you slow down, because you slowing down slows the rest of us down. And last time I checked, whatever we're doing was important enough to put some energy, some effort, and intention into. And it seems like to me, you have allowed whatever obstacle that's out there, whether real or perceived, to slow you down. We got to talk about that. And so instead of, having to deal with a lot of conflict, it's important to straighten out the values and the principles before you move forward, because that increases your belief. And when your belief is increased in one another, you are more hopeful. Now let's talk about manifesting possibility, right? And probability. When you are hopeful, you have a much higher chance of manifesting what you need to bring into existence much more so than when you are fearful, when you are doubtful, when you're hesitant, when you are scared, when you are, see, that's why courage is such an important value to me, because I have no use for the other stuff. I have no use for the opposite of courage, and I have no use for it. I can't find a way that makes any sense to even use, because even if you move forward and you fail with your best effort, you now realize that your best effort is not enough, and you may have to find some additional resources. You may have to find some additional space. You might have to use some additional things in order to keep the needle moving forward, and keep plodding forward. You might have to go back and retool, maybe get re-educated, or maybe do some things. But you can't let fear of failure stop you from moving forward and taking your best guess. Literally, sometimes an obstacle comes up and you don't understand how to get around it, over it, or under it, but you got to move forward anyway. There's no choice. There's no going back. You got to move forward, because that's where you're going to get the best intelligence. That's where you're going to get the best information while you're actually in the thick of it, right? Whatever the journey is that you're taking. So that's enough about belief. Let's talk about commitment. The reason why I'm talking about commitment next, because when your team is committed, they can only commit really to what they truly believe in, right? And then when I talk about commitment, it takes courage to commit to an effort when you are not in control of every aspect of that effort, because you got to trust other people that they're going to uphold their end of whatever the teamwork is. You got to believe and trust that they're going to do the right things at the right time. And you're going to find out more about them actually in practice and rehearsal and all that kind of stuff before you embark on the journey, right? In the test throughs and the run throughs that you're going to do, testing the processes, testing the procedures, testing to see if everything is going to work the way it's supposed to work, becoming familiar with one another. And the belief systems that you all have had and have shared and have explored over the past allows you now to heighten your levels of commitment. Right now, the commitment is not an either or thing. It's not a black or white thing. It is actually something that exists in a trajectory, right? There's a slight commitment, there's a moderate commitment, there's a full-on commitment, then there's shades of gray in the commitment world, right? You might commit to something specific, but not something broad in general. And so you have to talk through these things. What are we willing, committed to? What is the committed action that we as a team are going to take? We need to agree on how often we're going to check in, how often we're going to report, how often we're going to talk about it, how often we're going to, lean on one another, and how we're going to do that when we need help or whatever it is along the way, along the journey. We're going to have to talk all that through as much as possible, codify as much as possible what that is. And I'm a big believer in coming up with pledges and oaths and affirmations of the commitment, written documents that say, I promise to do this, and I will do this, and I will accomplish this, and I will move in this direction, and I will focus on these goals, and I will make sure I highlight and specialize whatever I'm doing. I will check these values and these principles and make sure I've honored them in the actions that I'm suggesting and in the actions that I'm giving, and so on and so forth. And I'm going to write all that down, right? Sign it. Make sure you have a good commitment letter, right? Or commitment ideology, philosophy, thought process, well written, brilliantly articulated, and spoken from each member of the team. Not because you're going to turn around and hold it up to them and go, see, you made a promise that you're going to do blah, 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 because they already know that, right? What you're doing is you're making sure that everybody made the commitment, and everybody knows that everybody made the commitment. And now everybody can look at everybody else and go, okay, I'm deeply committed, and this is what it means, and this is what it looks like, and this is the expectations that we have set to create whatever we want to create, to generate whatever we want to generate. I've seen it over and over again where teams are functioning and they don't know what they're committed to. They're just in it. I was like, okay. At some point, somebody has to ask the question, well, what are we actually going to do together? Because if I'm an expert in my field, I can commit to doing what I do for me, the way I do all things. But how does that function with everybody else? And how's everybody else going to receive that? We got to talk it out. We got to talk it through and agree that that's valuable, that's meaningful, and that commitment is acceptable to everyone on the team. Now, you can't leave people out of these discussions and these arguments, or not the arguments. I'm going to say keep it to discussion level, right? You can't leave people out of these discussions and then hope that they're going to function at the maximum level for the team. Why? Because they don't know what they're committing to. They don't know the depth of other people's commitment. Here's what happens. When you go on a team and everybody's committed, you step up your level of commitment. And it's not a competition, but it is an energy that flows with a well-functioning team that you cannot deny. And everybody can give their best, not worry about who else is not giving their best, because what it is that we're committed to is, again, well thought through, well rehearsed, well designed, well written, and brilliantly executed, right? You got to get to that point where you have in your planning process an understanding of what it actually is that you as a group are committing to in terms of time, money, talent. I like to call it the TQ, right? Time, talent, treasure. These are the three things that we all can commit. The question is, why should we? And we should be talking about those things. There's a reason why we should commit to this effort versus another effort, right? Because you can only have so many commitments going on at the same time before you're overwhelmed. And it's easy to be overwhelmed in a society where we're already all more overwhelmed with most of the things that we're doing. So it's important that you prioritize. It's important that you strategize. It's important that you communicate with the members of your team the level of commitment that you think is going to be needed and the level of commitment that you think you can bring to the table. And then you have to all agree. Now, does that mean everybody has the same level of commitment? I say absolutely not. That is ludicrous, and that doesn't make any sense. In any teams I've ever been on, everybody has had different levels of commitment. But those levels of commitment are clear to everyone involved on the team. So that everybody understands, okay, so listen, we can't have a meeting at 7 o'clock because somebody else has a prior commitment that supersedes this commitment. That's why it's so important for you personally to have a great sense of organization, personal organization, where you literally in prioritizing the habits, the initiatives, the things that you're going to commit to. You have to have a prioritized list of those things so that when you bring on something new, you got to realize something's got to give, because you can't commit to everything equally. That's why I told you earlier, right? There's going to be shades of commitment, but those shades of commitment have to be well communicated and well thought out and then shared with other members of your team. Nothing ruins a team more than mismanaged expectations. When people haven't been clear about what their activity is going to be and what they want to do, the way they want to do it, what they're going to commit to, what they're not going to commit to. When you're not spelling out all that information and you haven't really thought about it and you haven't really written it down or articulated it, and I would stress writing it down, because there are things that come up when you're writing that may not come out in your just chatting or conversation about things. It's having well-structured dialogue about This is the level of commitment that I'm willing to add to it. These are other things I got going on, and this is the reasons why this is going to be priority number 3, not priority number 1. Or, just being able to talk about that stuff first to yourself, write it down, like, so you can see it, review it, and then clean it up, make sure it's good, and then present it to the rest of your team members. So they know what kind of commitment that you're bringing to the table. They know what they can count on you for. Nothing's worse than thinking that you can count on something from somebody that you literally cannot count on them for. It hurts. It causes pain, and it causes people to retreat. And instead of moving forward in what they're doing, they fall backwards, and they feel let down. They feel put aside. They feel ignored. They feel like shame, blame, fear, doubt. These things creep in when belief and commitment are not both very strong at a higher level. Then there's some other things we're going to talk about in the coming weeks that I want to share with you about the 4 aspects of planning. And those ideas revolve around a sense of shared mission and understanding what that's all about, and then an understanding of the process, the details, the tools, the equipment, the strategy that we're going to use to move whatever the team forward is. When we have those things in place, everything's going to work well. We're going to talk about those other things next week. If there's any questions, and I don't see any questions in the chat or any comments in the chat, then we're going to move on. Today's going to be a short show because I got some things I got to do over here. But again, if you ever have any questions or any type ideas or concepts that you want to share on the show, that you want me to expose, feel free to contact me. My information is scrolling across the bottom of the screen right now. I look forward to hearing from you. I want to chat with you, want to talk to you, want to get your ideas, want to get your feedback. If there's something on the show that you think could be done better or something that you want to see more of, feel free to put that information in the chat. Feel free to share. I'll be more than happy to take a look at it and engage with you. Feedback to me is the greatest tool that ever existed. And so I appreciate it. I love it. I respect it. And I'm always here to listen. So if you want to contact me, again, my information is scrolling across the screen. I'm Coach Powell. I had a great time. I hope you did. And I'm signing out. Y'all have a good day.